It's time for Blue and White Breakdown on ESPN Radio 103.7 and 1450. Sponsored by Joel Confer Toyota and Joel Confer BMW. This is the place to be for news and analysis around Penn State football, basketball, and all 29 other sports. Call the show at 814-272-9625. That's 814-272-9625. Now, here's your hosts of Blue and White Breakdown, Matt Bortner and Zach Seyko.
Penn State stays undefeated after the bye week.
That's always a, if you take a loss during the bye week, things are not going in your direction. But doesn't this just sort of feel, it feels like we go back to last year, and I think it was 5-0 at that point. It just feels like, you know, we're probably having the same conversation that we were last year going into the Iowa game. Is
might as well have just aired that episode as a playback and then dubbed in Michigan. Iowa, Michigan.
Now, Michigan's got a much better offense than Iowa does, but I think in terms of where you are situationally, in terms of, okay, this is where we're going to find out what football team we have. And I think regardless of Sean Clifford getting hurt in that game last year, even with that loss, so you think, okay, maybe if we get Sean Clifford back, we think we're a pretty good football. Even with that loss, so you think, okay, maybe if we get Sean Clifford back, we think we're a pretty good football team. The P.J. Mustipher injury really hurt in that game too. So you would hope that either way it goes in this one, you get a better feel for what Penn State is. But I think for both teams, this is just it's sort of like a check mark, your checklist for the season. It's like, okay, now we sort of know what football team we have, and I think that's for Penn State and Michigan this week.
Yeah, it could be deja vu all over again because this is the exact same setup as you mentioned. It was a top 5 last year, and neither of those teams were really top 5 in the country.
Top 5 defenses, that was for sure before injuries hurt, and even Iowa the rest of the season, the quarterback play really hampered them. But yeah, you look at the rankings at the end of the year, you're right.
But that's what it was. You were 5-0. You beat a Wisconsin team on the road, like a Purdue team. And I would say that last year's Wisconsin team and this year's Purdue team are about a pretty equivalent.
Yep.
I think Purdue will finish 8-4, maybe 9-3. And honestly, because of the state of the Big Ten West, could make the Big Ten championship this year.
Yep.
It's really down to Illinois, Minnesota, and Purdue.
I think you could throw Wisconsin as a dark horse just to see if they galvanize around quarterback play. Not great, but see if they galvanize around.
Mertz looked like a Heisman against Northwestern.
But that goes to show you how wide open that West is.
Yeah, that Wisconsin could rebound in that way. And then, so you beat that Wisconsin team last year. You beat Auburn. Now it's at home in the whiteout, a little bit different. You don't go on the road and thump them.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the first differentiator between last season and this season is you handled, I thought that game against Wisconsin was a little bit closer, and frankly, Wisconsin should have won that game.
Yeah.
With the way that Penn State played. The defense, Arnold Ebiketie himself bailed Penn State out of that game. But it felt like without the pick six, I think Penn State beats Purdue handedly. They beat Auburn into the ground, and then they win all the other games that they're supposed to. Now here's this turning point, and it seems like everybody knows this. The turning point of the season when they get to Ohio State, it's been traditionally, but then Minnesota in 2019, Iowa last year, but it's been Ohio State. And when they lose that game, that especially when they're leading, Ohio State circa 2017, Ohio State circa 2018, where you lose after leading by double digits, and then you just lay an egg the next week, and it happened to be against Michigan back-to-back years, but then last year it was Iowa, and then you lay that egg against Illinois. So what does that mean now? Here we go again, top 10 matchup.
Well, I think you also look at it in the flip side, though. If you are able, which I mean, we've talked for a couple weeks now that we think this is a very fair matchup between the two teams. Is if you do win this game, what does that confidence do for Penn State on the flip side? So it's a very, very important game for Penn State.
Well, let me circle back here. So 2016. That turning point game was number 2 Ohio State.
Yep.
Yeah, it took a blocked field goal, but sometimes you need that magic, and then it just set them on just sent them to the moon.
Yep.
With the way that they played the rest of the season. They won every game handedly. Sure, they had slow starts in the first half, but they won every game decisively up until a home game for the Rose Bowl for USC. And this year, if they can beat Michigan, Ohio State's really the only game left that they can. I don't know. I like the way that this season sets up. I think the bye week came at the perfect time. You allow people to get healthy like Keandre Lambert-Smith, and we don't know the severity of these injuries. We just have to guess. But KLS can get healthy. Kevon Lee can get healthy. Any other guys that are just have some bumps and bruises. We know that Sean Clifford's taken a bunch of hits. I'm not saying he's on the injury report at this point, but there were the rumors leading up to Northwestern that he might not be available for the game. Just that if that gets out, you just have to say this is a good time to
good refresh
before the biggest. Honestly, Michigan is the biggest game of the season because of the way that James Franklin and this program are, at least during his 9-year tenure. This always happens. This either makes or breaks your season.
Well,
one game.
And I think because, too, sure that the team's aspirations are to be a Big Ten title contender, and maybe they can, but I think from the outside looking in with the trajectory of your program, just to get a big win on your resume, I think, and with the recruiting that we're seeing Penn State doing right now, that it can have a big effect on you. And look just at the win against Ohio State, what that had, and now they went on to win the Big Ten, so that had a great effect recruiting as well. But I think big wins against big-time programs have an effect on your overall outlook of a program.
This is Bloom White Breakdown, sponsored by Joel Comfort, Toyota, and BMW. He's Matt Bortner. I'm Zach Seyko. We're taking your phone calls, by the way. 272-9625. That is 272-9625. And put the 814 in front of it. 272-9625.
Let's hear who you think is going to win the big matchup. Penn State against Michigan, looking like a 7-point spread right now, and I think part of that too helps Penn State is I think how things have gone the past couple years. Right now, they're embracing the underdog mentality, and sometimes that lifts teams to new heights as well.
I'd lay money on it. In fact, I already did. DraftKings put it out at +9. And I already put money down on it, and I'd still take it at 7.5. I thought that this would be a 4-point game from Vegas. That was just my expectation for the odds. I'll go out. I'll say it right now. We're going to talk about it more, but I think Penn State wins this game.
Yeah, I'll save my prediction for later. But
that's why I want to get people.
I think it's an ultra close game.
Call in if you think that Michigan's going to beat the snot out of Penn State. Let us know. 272-9625. 272-9625. But that's really, I think Penn State has positioned itself nicely. My early season prediction was 10-2. I thought that Michigan and Ohio State would be losses, but after seeing them perform the way they have, they've gone above my expectations, and I think Michigan's down a little bit this year.
Yeah, and I think for me, and I thought there was probably going to drop one of those two games between Purdue and Auburn, just because my expectations going in, how young of a team and inexperienced. That, I think, is more so than just being undefeated at this point. I think what has made me feel much more comfortable about this team is how quickly some of the freshmen have, and some of the undergrads have without much experience have looked. Yes, they might have room to grow, but look like they're ready and should be playing, which they are, big-time football right away.
Well, and that's just it. A guy, let's take it for an example. I thought Singleton and Allen were going to be immediate playmakers and move their way up the depth chart because, and I said that through all the entire summer and everything else, because you just, if you talk to people who cover the team or just go to any of the Penn State practices, Jay Sider, James Franklin, when you asked about Singleton, when you asked about Allen, they lit up. They were glowing about those two players. So it's like, okay, but nobody thought to ask about a guy like Abdul Carter. Abdul Carter changes almost the entire complexity of this defense for the better because now you can run different formations with him. You have some more depth that we didn't think they were going to have at linebacker, and that's why the defense is much better than anticipated.
Well, and Curtis Jacobs is a playmaker too, but I think Carter brings an aspect of fear into a hitter into your defensive core. Tyler Elston has played much better than I expected this year, but I still think if there's one position, that's where on defense they really need to grow still, because I think there is learning curves that go with new positions and just the inexperience. But he brings, when he's in the game, I think it's a different attitude to the defense. He's a guy that will get downhill and make the big hit. So he has, you're right, he has been, I think, a huge difference maker for this Penn State defense.
Coming up next, we are going to nominate our player of the game, athlete of the week that wears blue and white. Plus, still more to come, some relevant Penn State news before we talk about some of the other Penn State sports, preview Michigan with our scouting report, and finish up the show with Around the Big Ten. He's Matt Bortner. I'm Zach Seyko. This is Blue and White Breakdown on State College's ESPN Radio, sponsored by Joel Comfort Toyota and BMW and Joel Comfort Quality Pre-Owned. Shop Joel Comfort Toyota and BMW 24/7 at joelcomfort.com.
Welcome back to Blue and White Breakdown on ESPN Radio 103.7 and 1450. Time for the guys to nominate the player of the game.
Matt, I'll let you field this one. We seem to agree as far as who we like as our player of the week.
Yeah, I had. You'll hear our play of the game in the next segment. You could go with her as well, but because she'll get her highlight there, I'm going to go with senior forward Kevin Wall on the ice hockey team. He scored a career-high 4 points, 1 goal and 3 assists in Saturday's 7-5 victory over Canisius. He also scored a goal in the first game, the season opener, which was a 5-2 win on Friday. Very excited for the Penn State hockey season this year. They are bringing back their 10 of their top 12 scorers from last year. Really don't lose a lot from last year. Have Solier back at net, who got hot at the end of the season. So I think this will be a Big Ten contending team once again.
And this was a team that was voted to finish 6th in the Big Ten by the coaches.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, though, it's so nitpicking when you go through top to bottom in the Big Ten. Like, well, if you put a team at 6th, you honestly might be, I mean, you could just be picking out of a hat at that point, because when you look top to bottom these programs, I think it is so thin. When you look at the Big Ten tournament every year, it's like you almost just throw the rankings out and you're like, okay, it's matchups and who brings their best game that day.
Yeah, I think that Penn State maybe leapfrogs the likes of a Wisconsin, for example, and an Ohio State. Breaking up that top 3 of Notre Dame, Minnesota, Michigan is the tough part, because right now I'd put Penn State at 4th if I had to rank them, and Ohio State and Wisconsin just slide down 1. Michigan State seems to be the bottom feeder of the group, but that's just because of how good the Big Ten is.
Yeah, and they get a lot, I think, which was a huge pickup over the offseason, was the kid from North Dakota who, blanking my mind now, but he was, I think he is ranked 3rd overall in games appeared in all-time, or not all-time, but currently in college hockey, and you get that from a quality program. He had a goal in the opening game, so I think he will be a very good addition for Penn State to add some experience to the team this year, and that's Ashton Calder from North Dakota.
This is Blue and White Breakdown on State College's ESPN Radio. He's Matt Bortner. I'm Zach Seyko. Thanks for joining us. You can join in on the conversation as well. 272-9625. That is 272-9625. We want to hear your predictions for Penn State, Michigan. Saturday, big noon kick, 12 p.m. between the Wolverines and the Nittany Lions. Make your prediction on the show here live. 272-9625. We just kind of finished up assessing where Penn State is after the bye week, or where they're going in terms of the entire season. Some other relevant news to the Nittany Lions, particularly football, and we'll start with recruiting. Anthony Robinson commits to Penn State. He's a member of the class of 2023, a 3-star JUCO cornerback, and we've seen how Penn State has done with JUCO players, especially guys in the secondary. So that's a testament to Anthony Poindexter, Terry Smith, but he comes from Butler Community College in Kansas, and I thought this was interesting. He's walking on. Actually, Robinson declined to pick up a scholarship from the likes of, I think Ole Miss was in there,
Ole Miss,
Marshall,
and Kansas, I think, was one of them as well.
And also, and there were about dozens of other programs that had offered him as well, and he decided to walk on at Penn State as opposed to going there where he had the scholarship. I'm sure there was a conversation about NIL, and you can go this route now where you have that, I wouldn't say ultimate security from NIL, but it lessens the burden of the cost of a college education.
Yeah, that, and I think it also sort of tips your hat that maybe Penn State has their eyes on a couple other guys to round out the 2023 recruiting class if they're
taking scholarships available.
If they're taking him on as a walk-on, because you would think if they're at the point where it's like, okay, we can just bring a guy in, that we give him a scholarship. But J.B. Nelson is probably the next guy you're looking at in terms of an impact player from a JUCO recruiting standpoint on the offensive line, who we've heard good things about. So Penn State, they've had a good track record of making these JUCO guys into players that honestly get quality playing time on the team, or actually become superstars. You look at Jair Brown or Jaquan Brisker.
Yeah, those guys, of course, most notably. Nelson has worked his way a little bit into the rotation with the injury to Hunter Norzad. Again, a good timing of the bye week. You can get Norzad back. But Nelson we've seen him slide in at left guard to at least spell Landon Tangwall, at least for a portion of the time against Central Michigan. That's just of note of J.B. Nelson. Anthony Dongo, speaking of offensive linemen, he is committed to the class of 2023 for Penn State. 24/7 Sports elevates him from a 3-star to a 4-star.
Yeah, and Penn State is now the number 12 ranked class nationally. They were up there, I think, at number 1 at one point.
Way early on.
Yeah, way early on. But still, it's going to be, what I'm so excited about this class is guys like Donka, who is now the number 17 interior offensive lineman. He's their 13th 4-star, but what I love about the class is just the quality of offensive linemen they're bringing in. Jevin Williams, you got Burkmeyer, who is the number 1 ranked offensive lineman.
Interior,
it so much starts up front, and we've seen how important getting an added run game to Penn State this year, and the running backs mean a lot to that as well. But it just makes your offense so much more unpredictable when you have the option of either running or throwing the ball.
And that's the balance that has helped Sean Clifford. It's helped the offensive line. It's helped the offensive play calling in general. And to think that offensive line group could have even been better. Remember, they did lose Josh Miller to Georgia. So that stings a little bit, but they can go get another offensive lineman in the recruiting. They were talking to, I think, forget his name, but Malvern Prep, there's a recruit that's committed to Notre Dame, and James Franklin just flew in the helicopter and said, hey, give me a call if you change your mind, thinking about you. All right, see you later, kind of thing. So they're busy doing that during the season as well. You think that James Franklin has an off day? He does not. It means that in this time period when he is coaching a football game, the bye week happens, he's out flying around to visit recruits.
It's actually probably your most active, well, it is your most active time, at least during the season, to be out on the recruiting trail.
And I mean, National Signing Day is right around the corner. It's 2 months away.
Yep.
So that'll be here before you know it. Some other Penn State news here on State College's ESPN Radio. 4 Penn State players were ranked in ESPN's top 25 freshmen. There was an article released on ESPN Plus. It's a subscriber thing, but Abdul Carter, Nicholas Singleton, Denai Dennis Sutton, and Katron Allen were all ranked. Abdul Carter, number 2. I was surprised that Singleton was not number 2, but it means that the writers are paying attention.
Yeah, and they, I think more so they just know how important it was for Penn State to get another linebacker in the mix, and he's a playmaker. But again, it just proves our point that we're talking about is having players with your recruiting classes that are ready to play right away, that it can be a difference maker in terms of what you see out on the product on the field when you're talking about getting a guy ready to be out on the field right away.
And Nicholas Singleton was right behind him at number 3, a 2-time Big Ten Freshman of the Week, back-to-back. Number 20 was Denai Dennis Sutton and Katron Allen at number 23. For me personally, and it's not to disrespect Denai Dennis Sutton, I would actually put Katron Allen above Dennis Sutton right now.
Dennis Sutton, I mean, and we're going to see more of him, and maybe he'll get even better, and we'll see him in bigger situations, but most of his sacks you've seen have sort of been in garbage time type situations.
Well, he leads the team in sacks, and when you look at that, it's okay, but everybody's getting sacks on this Penn State defense, and it's not to take away from Dennis Sutton.
But I
Allen's
think
contributed more.
He's got more in terms of he hasn't been in the main rotation like these other 3 guys.
Yeah. I just think I'd honestly put Allen in the top 15. I like Denai Dennis Sutton at as the 20th best freshman in the country, but for me, Katron Allen's number 23 ranking is a little disrespectful, and I think that's only because, well, Singleton has the long 50 or 60-yard runs. How about Katron Allen, who's honestly matching his numbers?
Yep.
Really. They had the same amount of yards and carries against Northwestern. Allen had 1 fewer fumbles. And then you have the success that he's still averaging a high clip at yards per carry. He gets it done. He got it done against Central Michigan. He showed out against Auburn as well. Like, it's a pretty even. Yeah, sure, Singleton hits the home run, but Allen hits a lot of doubles.
Yeah, he's very consistent, and I just, again, it's those 2 complement themselves so well.
Matt Rhule is unemployed. We go to the NFL here, but Matt Rhule played linebacker at Penn State, walked on from 94 to 97, and is now out of a job with Carolina.
I chuckle only because if that would have happened a year ago, there would have been and I know people were calling for him then. If that would have happened a year ago, you could just imagine the speculation of people saying to go after this guy. And I think he'll land on his feet at the college level. I think he's just so good at developing a culture. I think one place in the Big Ten to look at as a possibility is Nebraska. They're a place that needs some rebuilding, so he would be a guy on top of my list, honestly, if I was Nebraska.
Wisconsin in there as well. Not mine, but just what the media is saying. The media are saying Penn State foes like Nebraska and Wisconsin are at the top of the list. Auburn is in there as well because we know that Brian Harson's going to be fired sooner rather than later. Georgia Tech landed on that list. So basically the only college jobs that have really opened up, and that's where he's seen his success. If James Franklin was not the head coach at Penn State, that would be my second choice. I would take Matt Rhule. Now, if every single coach was available, would I want Nick Saban? Yeah. Would I want Kirby Smart? Yeah. But in terms of like, okay, let's be realistic for a second and look at the active free agent coaches. Matt Rhule would be my number 2 behind what James Franklin and the coaching staff has. And Joe Moorhead's up there as well.
I think what's so great about it is you know what you're going to get out of him.
He rebuilds programs, and it takes, 2-3 years? He went from 1-11 in his first year at Baylor to 7-6, and then 11-1. I mean, that's really saying something. That was a Baylor program that had all the turmoil from Art Briles, the player misconduct,
shambles,
the sanctions, or I should say 11-3 at Baylor. But he turned a Temple program. How easy is it to turn around Temple, of all places?
Not.
Yeah. And he turned around Temple and led them to back-to-back 10-4 seasons before he went to Baylor. So I think it's just a case of the college system is better for him. It is very hard to coach in the pros because now you have to be able to relate to grown adult men. You are not raising young kids anymore. You are on basically the same level. You're leading an army of men, not educating and helping the maturity of young men rather than adult men.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just where it is. I think he identifies more with the college player than at professional level. But I guess you could also say, though, he wasn't blessed with much talent at the quarterback position in Carolina.
No, I think there were bigger issues in Carolina than Matt Rhule coaching. But you saw the writing on the wall. And I do not want him in the Big Ten. I do not want him leading a Nebraska program because he knows how to recruit. Again, if he was able to build something in Temple, of all places, that will translate in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I feel you there.
All right, and the last thing before we go to break here, Sean Clifford is actually the number 1 quarterback in the entire country and plays in the red zone.
Yeah, the highest PFF grade of any Power 5 quarterback in the red zone this year. Actually, by quite a large margin. At number 1, he's at 92.9% by PFF. Jackson Dart of Ole Miss is second at 83.3%. Penn State has scored on 95% of their red zone trips this year. 20 trips, that's 16 touchdowns and 3 field goals. And I think of some of the obvious things to look at from their improvement from last year in terms of the offense is their ability to convert in the red zone. Even though they had a 5-0 record at this point last year as well, the offense was nowhere near at the production that they are right now this year.
No, that's definitely noted. I mean, even in short yardage situations, you're not going to the bubble screen. You still have that fancy backfield where Brenton Strange, Singleton, and Allen all line up in a 3-point stance.
But on occasions, you've mano-a-mano, you've picked up first downs, and that it's got to continue to get better to be converting in short yardage situations and sustaining drives is so important to be a top tier team, and it's got to continue to be better. But it is leaps and bounds better than it was last year.
He's Matt Bortner. I'm Zach Seyko. This is Blue and White Breakdown on State College's ESPN Radio. When we come back, the play of the game is next, and we're going to talk about news in the other Penn State sports, men's basketball, women's ice hockey, field hockey, soccer, just to name a few. Blue and White Breakdown is sponsored by Joel Comfort Toyota and BMW and Joel Comfort Quality Pre-Owned in Pleasant Gap. Come see the Joel Comfort Quality Pre-Owned difference for yourself. Joel Comfort Quality Pre-Owned, 475 East College Avenue in Pleasant Gap. Visit them 24/7 online at joelcomfortqualitypreowned.com.
It's time for the play of the game on Blue and White Breakdown.
Long and deep far side, reaches out and juggles, got it, touchdown, Penn State!
She seemed to get caught up a bit on herself, a potential just miss hit or even just a small touch outside.
Garvey's down. Here's Penn State, they score. And the Nittany Lions win the game. It's Sophia Gladio again. Just as quickly, momentum shifts, and the Nittany Lions find the back of
with the game-winning goal.
How about the flair for the dramatic? Her second game-winning goal in overtime in as many games. The first one against number 4 Iowa. That was on Friday night. And then Sunday against Lafayette in double overtime. That is what you call clutch. Sophia Gladio, who has been just an All-American for Penn State this year. She is one of the best players in the nation, and if Penn State can keep this rolling into the Big Ten and NCAA tournament, which we've seen over the years, they can be a force to be reckoned with in the postseason.
And Gladio was named Big Ten Offensive Player of the Week as well.
Fair.
Yeah. I would say she has definitely earned it.
The clutch gene.
So we've talked about men's hockey, field hockey. How about we talk about men's basketball? Jalen Pickett named to the preseason All-Big Ten team by the conference. But Penn State has been picked to finish 11th in the Big Ten preseason poll. Ouch.
Yeah, but I think it's one of those things, too, where you look top to bottom, and it's the difference between 11th place and even say like a 7th place can be 1 or 2 games. That's how good the Big Ten has been and how it eats itself up every year. So I think, and it's tough with how much freshman presence they're going to rely on this year, and they did bring in some veterans through the transfer portal, but when you're that young, the unknown, I think, is what really has pundits have Penn State pretty low. But there's also pundits saying that Penn State is one of the more underrated teams this year and a team that could scare some people.
That seems to be a fitting theme for a lot of Penn State sports,
Yeah.
Football, men's hockey, men's basketball, teams that are on the upswing and people just aren't really buying in. Do I think Penn State men's basketball wins the Big Ten? No. But I think that they finish a little more middle of the pack, maybe an 8th or a 9th.
And they had their inter-squad scrimmage on Saturday, and just reading up on some of the remarks from there, it looked like Keba Nye, one of their prized recruits.
He'll play a lot.
Yeah, he'll play a lot, and he looked every bit as ready in that inter-squad scrimmage. Jameel Brown, the guard, highly touted recruit as well. Those two were their prized recruits. That in terms of wins, he says at practice, Micah Shrewsbury says he leads the guys in that, and then that he is a guy that is just ready to play as well. And also that they were shooting the ball. I think they said they made 6 consecutive threes in that scrimmage in like a 4-minute time period. So that's, I think, also one thing that Penn State has been looking for is consistent three-point shooting. And if you get that, upsets are so dependent on the three-point ball. So we'll see if Penn State can up that category this year.
Andrew Funk, getting him in the transfer portal. You get Miles Dredd back.
Cam Winter.
I mean, I am eager for Penn State men's basketball.
Very excited. I haven't been this excited for Penn State basketball in a long time.
Yeah, since the Tony Carr and the Mike Watkins, Lamar Stevens trio. Yeah. It's been a long time. That was, 2016 when they went to the NIT championship and beat Utah?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a while. We talked about men's hockey already, as I mentioned. Penn State wrestling schedule is finally out. And I honestly, there's
waited long enough.
Yeah, I'm surprised they didn't release it a week before the first dual meet. They open up the season with Lock Haven. That is November 11th. Honestly, the schedule is it's status quo as it is last year. You have some of the out-of-conference dual meets. You go down you have a big tournament where
and I don't think they named any of the possible people that they would be in that tournament with. I think the meet that they have.
Yeah.
I mean, the most interesting though is that you have back-to-back weekends, home matches against Iowa and Michigan at the Bryce Jordan Center.
Yes, they are both at the Bryce Jordan Center. So that's a battle of top 5 programs, and they're both at home, most importantly, and then they're in the Bryce Jordan Center.
Back-to-back weekends. They do have a match against Rec Hall sandwiched in between against Michigan State, but get those two that close together where I would assume, I'd have to look at the basketball schedules, that they have it set up that maybe they don't have to rearrange things, but those are going to be two dynamite matchups.
So Lock Haven is at home November 11th, a 7 p.m. start. They finish the season Sunday, February 19th against Clarion before the Big Ten Championships and the NCAA Championships. I think this still needs to be brought up. I hate how college wrestling does not have a team duels type of tournament.
Yeah.
I really hate that it just goes right into the individual. Like Pennsylvania State, the high school has that. Why can the PIAA pull that off, but the NCAA can't?
Don't know.
They need
it would be electric.
You'd see probably Penn State versus Iowa in the championship at 1 and 2. I mean, but I just don't know why they don't do that at the NCAA, or if they're even discussing it. That's a different conversation. But it's an important one that they need to have. Let's jump to soccer. Penn State women's soccer snapped a 2-game losing skid, winning 2-0 at Maryland, and they play Wisconsin on Thursday and Michigan on Sunday over the next 7 days.
And for the men, they had it easy with a 4-1 victory over Michigan State. Liam Butts had 2 goals, and they have Indiana on Friday on the road, and then a ranked matchup against number 17 Ohio State on Sunday.
And let's finish with women's volleyball, and then we'll move to our scouting report of Michigan football next. Women's volleyball, 14-3 on the season overall, 3-3 in conference. They did have a comeback attempt against number 6 Ohio State, but it came up short on the road. They fell 3-2 in the sets. Ohio State was up 2-0 after the first 2 sets, and then Penn State tied it and sent it into a 5th set, but did lose 15-11 in that final one.
Yeah, and then they sweep Illinois in 3 sets on Sunday. If you think, it can only get easier after playing the number 6 team in the country, Number 3, Nebraska on Friday. They play them on the road in Lincoln, and then Iowa on Saturday. So that will be a match that you will want to keep your eyes on.
Yeah, Nebraska's really, I think, dominated the Big Ten, at least as of late in women's volleyball. And it looks to continue to stay that way.
Penn State of new.
Yeah, but and Penn State's been ultra competitive. I'm just saying Nebraska's now there, trying to take a hold of it as well.
Yep.
And they've been consistently in the top 10. And I remember, I think I went to a match where Nebraska was unranked, and they came in here, and I think they swept Penn State. This was maybe about 4 years ago or so. So the Cornhuskers have a very good program when it comes to women's volleyball. He's Matt Bortner. I'm Zach Seyko. This is Blue and White Breakdown on State College's ESPN Radio. The Michigan Scouting Report is up next. We are sponsored by Joel Comfort Toyota and BMW and Joel Comfort Quality Pre-Owned. Rent a Toyota at Joel Comfort Toyota Rent-A-Car, 120 East Clinton Avenue in State College.
Hey, it's Penn State men's basketball head coach Micah Shrewsbury, and you're listening to Blue and White Breakdown on State College's ESPN Radio.
Thanks as always, Coach. All right, Michigan is the opponent this week. It is, let's see, what time is it? 5:46. I can tell time. 5:46. And Michigan still sucks.
It's funny. The time will change, and the answer is still the same.
Yes. Yes, one time. This is the clock that even if it's broken, it's always right. So he's Matt Bortner. I'm Zach Seyko. Thanks for joining us on Blue and White Breakdown, sponsored by Joel Comfort Toyota and BMW and Joel Comfort Quality Pre-Owned. If you want to give us your prediction, you still have a chance to, especially since it is the Scouting Report segment, 272-9625. That is 272-9625. Put the 814 in front of it and give us a call. Michigan is ranked 4th in the country. Well, depending where you look, they actually moved down to number 5 in the AP Top 25, which I thought was... Did the AP only watch the first half against Michigan and Indiana? Because they still beat them 31-10 on the road. And their running backs coach, this is unfortunate news, collapsed on the sideline. Mike Hart, I remember him torturing the Big Ten. Him and Jake Long were basically a dynamic duo. They set records for like running the ball to the left side with Mike Hart and Jake Long as the left tackle.
Mike Hart is the leading rusher in program history. He was a guy who was like 3.4 per carry. Like it was 3 or 4 yards per carry every time, but he would carry the ball 30 to 40 times a game, and he would just wear you out.
Yeah, his pro career was all right. He didn't do so well. He started out with the Indianapolis Colts, but now he's back on Jim Harbaugh's staff, and he's the lead running backs coach. I think Fred Jackson's going to be the interim running backs coach until Mike Hart is back in action for Michigan. But long story short, he's in stable condition.
Yeah.
But he collapsed on the sideline in the first quarter. Game's tied 7-7 and had to be stretchered off. The news said that he had a seizure. I'm just glad he's okay, but for a Michigan team to really bounce back from that after the game was tied, I thought Indiana was going to win that.
And I think what they said at halftime, he called the team to just let him know that he was doing well. So I think that probably helped them out quite a bit. But yeah, if you have a guy that is so well respected and that they really care for, especially the running back room, I think it took a lot of guys some time to sort of get their minds right in that. But Indiana, give credit to Indiana, at least in that first half. They made things very difficult on Michigan. Michigan, I think their biggest issue in that game was just not finishing off drives. One of those times they go for the field goal in short situation, it gets blocked. But Indiana's just overall offensive playmaking, they don't have much at all to go to.
No, they don't. And Indiana was missing its top two linebackers. A lot of guys were hurt for them, especially this is a Michigan team that likes to run the football. I mean, it shows. Blake Corum had 25 carries, 124 yards, 1 touchdown. I think he's over 730 yards now for the season. He had 243 in one game this season already.
5 touchdowns against UConn.
He has 11 total.
Yeah. And I was a bit surprised that was the first game McCarthy went over 300 this year just because of how many points they've scored. But that tells you how much they rely on their running game to sort of set everything else up. And they're not a team. They're more explosive in big plays in their run game than they are the pass game. They don't really throw the ball down the field often or that well, even though they have a lot of good receivers to throw to. Their short pass game is really where they make their hay in the passing game. So I think that's an interesting and I think a good matchup for Penn State is to see if you play them man-to-man with your good coverage. I think Joey Porter Jr. will probably be on Ronnie Bell. We'll see if Roman Wilson will play this week. He did not make the trip last week to Indiana. See who Penn State, probably Kalen King with that matchup. But what I'm interested to see is if they break off in coverage, how the linebackers react, and even Michigan's tight ends with Schoonmaker. Eric Fall hasn't played in the last 3 weeks, but I think Schoonmaker is the guy to watch out for Michigan just because if you're looking at a weakness in Penn State's defense, it is the linebackers in pass coverage.
Well, and Eric All was the one that scored the game-winning touchdown last year on the crosser when Michigan won 21-17. I mean, that's how close Penn State was. Even though they finished 7-6, they were still a competitive team that almost beat the team that went to the college football playoff. It was the number 3 seed.
Yeah, and
or the number 2 seed.
Not to mention go to Ohio State and play them very close as well, probably even closer than what the score dictated, which was still within striking distance. So yeah, I think Penn State they've got their hands full, obviously, but I think as we've talked, it's what are we really going to see out of these teams? You look at strength of schedule. Penn State is 90th in the country. Michigan is 94th. The talent is obviously there for both teams, but it's truly when push comes to shove, you have your toughest matchup of the season. Who comes out to the top?
Penn State versus Michigan. It's a noon kickoff on Saturday. Big Noon will be there. Gus Johnson and Joel Klatt will have the call on TV. Of course, Steve Johns, Jack Ham, Brian Tripp will have your radio coverage on ESPN Radio and our sister station, 99.5 The Bus. Tailgate show locally begins. You and I and Thomas Frank Hart, T. Frank, will be on the air starting at 9 a.m., so have your coffee ready. Keys for Penn State and Michigan in this game. What's going to be some of the deciding factors for you, Matt?
Well, I think the run game, obviously, on both sides is to unlock things in your passing game. I think Penn State will be more creative with having the bye week and just their toughest opponent to date. But I think taking care of the football is going to be so important in this game because both teams do it so well. It is turning the other team over. Penn State is +6 in the turnover margin. Michigan is +4. And honestly, Michigan doesn't do a whole lot in terms of taking the shots down the field that I talked about earlier. So taking care of the football becomes ultra important. If you're sustaining drives, J.J. McCarthy is a good runner. He doesn't do it often, but he can extend time in the pocket. Can Penn State get to him? Trent Jones, their right tackle, will be out in this game. But if things go awry, I think it will be whatever team turns the ball over more will probably come out on the losing side of it in this game.
My biggest keys are the fact that Michigan does not return its 3 top defenders from a year ago. Ajabo, Aiden Hutchinson, and Dax Hill. You don't have that pass rushing presence, which means that the Penn State offensive line should be able to win up front. You will be able to keep Sean Clifford upright, and the offense will be able to move the football now that you have that a balanced attack, and you don't have to go fake punts, fake field goals, try all this fancy stuff, go for it on 4th down when it doesn't make sense to. I think Penn State wins this game because they won't be terrorized by Hutchinson and Ajabo off the edge. Hutchinson had 4 sacks last year?
Yeah, Michigan, though, is still, they are 5th nationally in team sacks so far this year. Again,
against Hawaii, Colorado State.
Your schedule is
they played a preseason. Good for them.
But they, even in Big Ten play, they've been able to get to the quarterback. 7 sacks last week. I wouldn't sleep on it, but they're nowhere near the quality of pass rushers that they had last year.
It's also the best defense they're going to face.
Yes, the best defense they're going to face. I think so. I think it's comes down to some of the final possessions in this game, and I think Penn State comes out on top, 24-21. I think this is a game where Parker Washington may break out. We've been looking for him to have one of those signature games this year. I just think the Penn State offensive playbook has been able to expand so much this year, and I think that will give Michigan fits in this game. And I just don't know if passing the ball, if McCarthy is explosive enough. But the caveat is, I think you got to take care of the football in this game.
I don't think that Michigan can score that many points, actually. Josh Gaddis is no longer the offensive coordinator. This is the best defense that they're going to face. The O-line is still good, but it's not the same in years past. And is J.J. McCarthy that much better than Cade McNamara, who was benched for McCarthy, then got injured?
Yeah.
It didn't happen the other way around. They just said, you know what, how does that click in the locker room? I know we're running out of time here. I'm going to go Penn State 28, Michigan 17. I think that Penn State wins decisively on the road, and they will jump into the top 5.
And again, I think it's just what team are you at this point? I don't know. So I could be dead wrong on this prediction. I just don't feel like we know enough about these two teams yet, and this will be the week that we truly find out some of the competitors in the Big Ten, and it could turn out to be that both of these guys are capable of beating Ohio State this year.
Across the conference around the Big Ten is next when we come back here on State College's ESPN Radio.
This is Blue and White Breakdown on ESPN Radio 103.7 and 1450. It's now time to look across the conference and see where Penn State stands in the Big Ten. Across the Conference is sponsored by Happy Valley Adventure Bureau. You don't need to leave Happy Valley for a great getaway. Plan your staycation today. Visit the Happy Valley Adventure Bureau for day trip ideas.
And one final time here on the show. Rutgers is firing its offensive coordinator after only putting up 13 points against Nebraska, and Purdue and Illinois share the Big Ten West at the top.
Yeah, talk about lack of points, too. Illinois beat Iowa 9-6. Talk about an offensive coordinator that probably needs to go, and that's Ferentz at Iowa.
Bleed Blue and White every Monday at 5 p.m. with Matt and Zach on ESPN Radio 103.7 and 1450.